This is the first of 5 stories that we're going to cover, and we thought we'd start off with something that didn't make as much news as I expected it to, but it's that Western components were found in Iranian-made drones that were being used by Russia. Ukrainian intelligence linked three-quarters of Iranian drone components to US companies and some Japanese, German, Chinese, and Israeli firms as well. And of course, Iran has transferred a couple of hundred drones to Russia to support their invasion of Ukraine. And that's how Ukrainian intelligence came across an Iranian drone to deconstruct. The rub here, of course, and Dimitri, I'll be interested in your take, is that Iran is under sanctions, which makes the procurement of those components illegal. Clearly, something isn't working.
Yeah, so we give ourselves 60 seconds of hot takes on all of these things in order to stop from blathering. And I know, John, you wanted to dig into that sanctions question and are the sanctions working? And I'd be really interested in your views on it. I wanted to kind of go to the end of that piece and think about the fact that a lot of the commentary on this Iranian drone program kept speaking about the fact that it's such an advanced program. They've made so many homegrown advances. It's such a formidable presence in the region. But I think the other thing that this revealed, apart from the sanctions piece you're going to talk about, is that fundamentally, the Iranian drone program was still a design and assembly program. This is a program that does not work without Western components that are not homegrown. And I think there are obvious parallels here with the Russian armed forces, which very quickly discovered once sanctions hit that they could no longer build a whole bunch of things, beginning with tanks and missiles and frankly ending with their entire automotive sector, which is also all about assembly. John, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I obviously largely agree with you. I think the sanctions piece is interesting, not so much that the sanctions are failing, which I don't think it's black and white, like they're succeeding or they're failing. And I think that's what a lot of the media coverage misses about sanctions. The idea isn't that they will be 100% perfect. I mean, in an ideal world, they would be, but the idea is that you make it incredibly difficult. You drive a lot of this stuff underground, which means it's harder to perfect acquiring components. You can't establish clear supply chains out in the open. So even if you're the US Department of State policy planning, whatever they are, and they're saying, okay, what's the best case scenario for these sanctions? If they're being realistic, it looks a lot more like, well, Iran's probably going to be able to get components for their weapons, but if things go wrong, they won't be able to easily be resupplied. They'll always be looking over their shoulder on these supply chains because they're technically illegal. It's going to be a lot more work to do what an unsanctioned country can do out in the open. So I think the sanctions piece is right. Like, sanctions don't work, or there's ways to always get around sanctions. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they aren't useful in hampering and making it really, really difficult for these kinds of regimes to get their hands on components. So don't throw the baby out with the bathwater just because of this story, I guess is what I would say.
I agree. The one thing I would throw into that basket is sanctions, like a lot of laws, are 10% law, 90% enforcement.
Right.
One of the reasons that the sanctions against Russia appear to be working is that the message went out loud and clear that there would be zero tolerance. There was so much focus. Some companies unilaterally pulled out without even necessarily being directly affected by the sanctions. And there was this sense that the EU and the US would be quick off the mark with secondary sanctions against, say, Chinese firms that chose to violate sanctions against or sell through to Russia. Whereas I'm not as certain the same level of focus has been there on Iran.
Right. Yeah, in terms of people being like, if we find you, we will bring the full force of our whatever to bear. Yeah, that's a very fair point.
Exactly. Nobody wants to wake up with the Commerce Department standing over them, but the Commerce
Ugh, that's
Department
hideous.
can only look. You haven't had that dream?
Nightmare.
No,
All
yeah.
right, shall we do our second quick take?
Absolutely. Thanks so much for watching. If you like what you saw, please give us a like, a comment, and subscribe to the channel to be notified as soon as we put up new videos. Also, don't forget that down below is a link to the amazing International Intrigue free daily newsletter so that you can be ahead of the news at those water cooler conversations. Thanks so much.